less adapted world you're living in, yeah, the more handicapped you are.
All too often, we're forced to behave as athletes to overcome obstacles in our everyday city lives. These are sometimes impossible to overcome for disabled people. Accessibility is still far from being a reality in Europe, but it's a goal for a growing number of cities. Kees Jan van der Cloister's motto is "Live fast," and he does, in spite of a snowboarding accident that left him paralysed in 2001. A Paralympic Games gold medalist, he also gives children and adults in wheelchairs training to help them face a world seldom suited to their needs. To get an idea of the world he lives in, we went out for lunch with him in Amsterdam, a city of bridges and cosy little restaurants.
So what often happens to me is that I see a nice little restaurant and I want to go in there. I get confronted with a few steps. Well, these aren't too big actually, but let's see what they have for lunch today and if I can get in. Okay, hoi. I wilde een hapje komen lunchen. So yeah, that wouldn't be an option.
KJ's first attempt fails. There are 2 flights of stairs between him and the toilet. The waitress sends him to the restaurant next door. More steps, another door. KJ's second attempt is more successful, but not without some hurdles.
We can have lunch over there. It's funny. Yes, now, and now push. Push with the knees really up. One more. No, it's not about strong. We have to get pressure on the wheels. We go backwards one more time. I go here, you hold me, and I lift a little bit in your arms. And now we go up.
A simple ramp would have avoided all this. But legislation in the Netherlands, like in many other European countries, does not impose clear rules on how and when public buildings should be updated to make them accessible. In countries where legislation does exist, it's often ignored because controls and sanctions are rare.
This is the toilet from inside. And actually I'm quite happy with my small wheelchair. And I'm able to get in here, but yeah, you can imagine if you have an electric wheelchair or something, it would be impossible to go to the toilet in this restaurant. And that's a pity, because they have good food and it's a nice restaurant, but accessibility, don't be scared if I crash.
These 3 steps could have made all the difference for a less abled person in a wheelchair. Sometimes it's easier to just stay home rather than go out for lunch with friends.
There's actually too few people with disabilities moving actively in society, especially in wheelchairs. A lot of people stay inside. And yeah, once there's more people moving around in society in wheelchairs, maybe business owners will realize that it's necessary to make their business more accessible.
Spain is among the most active countries in the EU in terms of accessibility. The Fundación Once plays a big role in promoting social integration for disabled people. Several Spanish cities have won recognition for their achievements. Avila won the first edition of the European Award for Accessible Cities in 2010. We met Jesús Hernández Galán, Director of Accessibility at Fundación Once in Madrid, which is hosting the organization's 4th Contemporary Art Biennial exhibition. Jesús is part of the jury for the Access City Awards. This allows him to monitor whether accessibility is taken into consideration in urban planning, culture and new technologies.
European cities are working to become more accessible, but they still have a long way to go. Things are improving, but at a very slow pace. We need legislation on accessibility at a European level. We need harmonization between member states so that we can all move in the same direction.
Spain's Fundación Once works hand in hand with schools of architecture and architectural firms to plan more accessible cities and avoid urban spaces becoming real labyrinths. The district of Valdebebas, currently under construction in northern Madrid, is considered a pioneering example of accessibility. Accessibility was included in the project from the very start, with help from experts at Once. It's a whole new world of codes. Different materials, colors and textures are used to help disabled people get around.
The pavements are divided into static and dynamic bands. In the dynamic band, tiles are bigger to give an idea of movement. Next to it, we have the static band, with smaller tiles which indicates obstacles.
Texture codes and color codes help people with sight and mental disabilities. The height of the patterns and the angle of the slope at a pedestrian crossing are carefully studied to address different forms of disabilities.
People who use wheelchairs prefer continuity, while blind people prefer to have a tangible element that can make them understand where the pavement stops and where the street starts, something they can feel with their feet to understand immediately if they're stepping onto the road.
But when accessibility has not been taken into account from the start, things get more complicated. Mariano's been blind since he was 18. He takes us for a walk near Colón Square in central Madrid, renovated just 2 years ago. With his dog Lilo by his side, things go pretty smoothly. But when Mariano is alone with his stick, glaring planning mistakes surface. Sharp edges border the pedestrian crossing, the tactile paving is too high, and the bus shelter's design is confusing. Blue stickers had to be added to prevent people with sight problems from hitting the glass.
This is really strange because it has these openings here and you don't understand why. There are corners that are really confusing because you think, well, where's this opening taking me? Is it the end of the bus shelter? Is it a lateral exit? I don't really understand. And why is this corner here?
The European Commission is working on a European Accessibility Act and is active in developing accessibility standards at a European level.
The goal for the future is to not have to ask, when we go to a hotel, for example, whether it's accessible or not, the same way we never ask if it has electricity or water. We take that for granted.
Lack of accessibility often means disabled people are deprived of a social life, a job, or access to public services. Invisible to many, accessibility remains one of the most subtle forms of discrimination.